And the compensation factor is very, very important because the federal regulatory system, whether we're talking about drugs, medical devices, automobiles, it never, historically or in the present day, provides compensation for people who are injured by products. That's our state law civil justice system, the jury system that does that. So if we don't have that system in play, we have no compensation. Why is that important? Well, it's particularly important in our society. The United States stands alone among industrialized nations in not having any national health insurance. We don't have national accident insurance. So that if we don't have the civil justice system, we really have no compensation for people who are injured by products. It's particularly true when we know about 45 million Americans don't have any health insurance at all. Just to recap, it's important for purposes of compensation, but it's also important when we realize the civil justice system doesn't work when it's flourishing and when it's working as it should, doesn't work in odds with the federal regulatory system. It complements the federal regulatory system. It sits side by side with it and pushes it in the direction of greater safety and greater effectiveness of the products that we want everybody to have, but we want to ensure that they're as safe and effective as they can be.
Only a tiny number of drugs, something like 150 out of the several thousand drugs on the market, have FDA-approved medication guides. So for starters, most people do not get any kind of approved and really useful information with most of the prescriptions they get filled. The FDA has the authority to do that. They haven't. Generally, in this country, the system of automatically ensuring that every patient, when they get a prescription filled, gets a reliable piece of information is a disaster. Most patients don't get it because most drugs don't have any requirement for it.
In a typical pharmacy setting, especially with a chain store, you could be filling 300, 400, 500, 600 prescriptions in a day, and it doesn't leave a lot of time for the pharmacist to do counseling.
A large proportion of many drugs are prescribed so-called off-label. In other words, the doctors are prescribing them for diseases or indications for which there isn't enough evidence of safety and effectiveness for them to be approved for that purpose. We can say the FDA should be doing more in terms of warning about dangers of drugs, but they really don't have the authority to intervene when a doctor is prescribing off-label.
One of the messages that we've been trying to pound home over the 15 years of doing our radio show is that there's only one person who will be responsible for your own health, and that's you. You can't rely on the doctor anymore. You can't rely on our government to protect us because there are other interests that the government has at its heels, which unfortunately ends up with them not doing things that are best for us, but we're doing things that are best for them or for other interests.
We can't get things right if we don't monitor the situation, and we have to keep on top of things. So that's the way it goes. Goes round and round.
I can't sleep through the night. The way you done me, you know it ain't right. I can't do the things I used to do. I got the Levaquin blues. My mind is foggy, I can't hardly speak. My body's aching and my knees are weak. It's been years, but I ain't over you. I got the Levaquin blues.
You'll have a class of drugs out there, and then a new version of within that class may be put out on the market, or sometimes a completely new antibiotic will come out on the market. We'll get detailed by the drug reps on that drug. It's usually typically the greatest thing since sliced bread. They're selling us drugs. The drug reps are trying to make a living. They're salespeople. So you take those things with a grain of salt.
Fluoroquinolones are a relatively recent family of antibiotics, the most familiar of which to people are Cipro, Levaquin, and so forth, that have been developed, and there are more and more of them, although some of them have been taken off the market because of their dangers. Generally, antibiotics, including these fluoroquinolones, are greatly overprescribed. They're prescribed for diseases that don't even involve bacteria, and if the drugs are antibacterial and you don't have a disease that involves bacteria, what is the point of prescribing them? Doctors find it's much easier to write a prescription than to take a careful history and do the kinds of things to determine is it or is it not a bacterial infection.
As a class, fluoroquinolones are very effective. One of the benefits is that they have extremely good absorption from the intestinal tract, so taking the medication as a pill is oftentimes as effective as getting it as an IV. These drugs have become drugs of choice for several different conditions, including community-acquired pneumonias, certain intestinal infections. When you use a medication, when you prescribe a medication, you have to prescribe it for the appropriate circumstance. If I admit a patient with an episode of acute diverticulitis, which is a severe intestinal infection, then absolutely quinolones are, in combination with other drugs, the standard treatment, the standard initial treatment for that infection.
There really are very few diseases for which the first choice antibiotic, even if it's a bacterial disease, is a fluoroquinolone. And yet these drugs are heavily promoted and heavily prescribed.
There are still plenty of antibiotics out there that are inexpensive, that people tolerate well, that there aren't necessarily bugs resistant to, that can be used first. In medicine, we like new and we like exciting, and unfortunately we like more expensive as well. And so, when a new antibiotic comes out, it's like vogue to be able to prescribe that one. Oh, it's got all these benefits to it. And so that's sort of the way the medicine machine works these days.
In March of 2000, I was prescribed Levaquin for a sinus infection. On the 5th day, I couldn't get out of bed. It was like a bomb going off in my body. I was 16. I had wanted to be an animation artist. My dream was coming out to California and being an animation artist for Disney. And I had done things like flipbook animations. I could draw over 200 pictures a day, which was the industry standard at the time. But when all of this happened, I couldn't even pick up a pencil. And I couldn't move. When my mom asked me what was going on, I told her if she remembered Jurassic Park, the scene where the kid grabs the electric fence, and that's what it felt like throughout my whole body. I couldn't even go to the bathroom myself. Someone had to pick me up and actually carry me to the bathroom. So we had no idea what was going on. I mean, we had never heard of anything like this happening before.
Our whole life became a nightmare when it happened, because we were just so frantic because Sherry was in so much pain and no one could tell us what was going on. Basically, we had doctors say, "You're crazy, this drug can't do this to you."
I said, "Oh, stop taking it, drink a lot of water, the reaction will only last for a few days, it's just a little allergic reaction and you'll be fine." I had extreme pain in my hands, in my feet, in my legs, in my arms, in my back, just to the point where I couldn't even move. I had skin rashes, ringing in the ears. My Achilles tendon was inflamed to the point of rupturing. I had to wear dark glasses. I looked like a bug, actually, because the glasses were so dark. And I had to wear those for 3 months, inside and outside, because the light hurt my eyes so badly.
I felt so bad because I had given my daughter something that she should have never been given because I didn't know. It was horrible.
After Sherry was made sick by the Levaquin, we realized that there weren't a lot of people out there who really knew what was going on with her. So I was at college, and I had access to my university's medical library, and so I started looking at all of the peer-reviewed literature that had been published in medical journals. That literature revealed some really horrifying things to me, that the fluoroquinolones damaged tendons and cartilage, and then they also damaged the repair mechanisms for the tendons and the cartilage, meaning that this wasn't something that was just going to go away.
I talked to people at the FDA, and I remember one lady basically told me that they knew they had a problem with these drugs, and someday they were going to have to do something about it. And I asked her when, and she couldn't tell me.